Number three, Underground River says, I'm a young pastor of a church with people mostly in their 60s and 70s. My staff only often micromanages me, corrects me in public, and treats me like a grandchild instead of their pastor. Any advice? Well, knowing very little about your situation, I'll give you just what brotherly advice comes to my mind here. And one of them is, I'll give you three pieces of advice. One is to genuinely see this as an opportunity to grow thicker skin. I'm not saying that you aren't being offended or they're not mistreating you. I'm not saying that at all. But you know this from reading scripture, that our trials are meant to refine us, and that our hardships and difficulties are meant to change our character, and that the things that tax our patience are meant to teach us patience. And so you as a pastor, you're getting a chance to display grace and patience in front of all of the people that are there, even when you see them as the ones that are mistreating you. I mean, Jesus most optimally demonstrated his love by the way he treated those who mistreated him. And so this is something where I would say, see this as, it doesn't make them right in what they're doing, but it does remind you that there's a spiritual battle going on here in your character to serve the Lord and honor him in those things. The second thing I would say is, maybe I'll say 5 things, 4 things, I don't know, I'm already forgetting the numbers I had in my head. But the second thing I'll say is, don't bow to being micromanaged if the decision you're making is honestly within your purview, within your authority, and you fully believe this is the right decision to make. Don't bow to that being micromanaged, because what you're doing then is you're not just yielding in a positive and gracious sense of yielding. You're abandoning your responsibility to make the right decisions in some areas. And so listen to the people, but when that kind of pressure comes, and if you get kind of pushed down into an always give in mentality, that can actually be very unhealthy. So what I'm saying is, first point, be gracious to those who are doing this to you. Treat them with love and kindness. But second point, don't just be a pushover. Be willing to yield and listen. If there's any wisdom in what they say, receive it. Take time to think about it. But when you have the right decision here and someone else pushes against, don't just give in and give up all the time. And just to do that graciously, though, is the trick. The next thing I'll say is that scripture does say, because you said you're a young pastor and you have a church with people mostly in their 60s and 70s. And I would say this is the one thing I would want to have you remind yourself of a lot. And that is that scripture says to, like, it gives the example, rise in the presence of an old man. That this idea of respecting those who are older than us, who have a lot more wisdom and experience than us, is huge, absolutely huge. And there's times where they are going to not know and they're going to be wrong, but there's probably a lot of times where you can learn so much from these people. And if you see it as this is where you got to guard your heart. If you see it as a competition relationship where you're competing for like spiritual superiority, because I've seen that. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I mean. Where we're not just brothers and sisters getting along. We're sort of like competing for who is the top dog spiritually. If that happens, it'll kill lots of things. It'll be a long list of things that die because of that. But if you can listen to them and say, hey, 60s and 70s, like here, maybe you're 30 and you're like, this person has literally 30 more adult years in their life than I do. Right? Like how long have I really been an adult and acting like it? They've got 30 plus years of that, more than me. Maybe there's wisdom in what they're saying, even if they're not 100% right. Give them the respect, give them the hearing. Don't abandon your role to make a decision, but know that you are there with people who are your elders, biologically speaking, and they may have wisdom for you and you can learn and grow from it. And finally, the last thing I would say is this: if you feel like it's really a problem, one-on-one, take someone out to coffee and say, hey, I've been struggling with this problem. I know I'm younger, but I am the person who's been called and put into this position of pastor, and I got to make a lot of decisions. I sometimes feel like everybody else has an idea of how they think things should be run, and a lot of people are kind of trying to push me into their decisions instead of just giving me input to make my own decisions. I want to hear them. I want to hear you, but I want to be able to make a decision and not feel like I have to just bow to the decisions of everybody else. You know, you're not the pastor. You guys brought me in. And so I want to try to serve the Lord, hear you. But you see, this one-on-one confrontation is the most gracious way to do it, I think, where you explain your honest dilemma. Like, I want to hear you, but you can't just control me. You can't just pull me on puppet strings. If you can do that with the top offenders, pull them aside, gracious brotherly conversation with them, then I would suspect in most cases things would get better. Take everything I say with a grain of salt, consider it with wisdom. I pray the Lord guides you in how to handle this.